The argument ends. Not because anything got resolved, not because both people said what needed to be said, but because one of you changed the subject, or went quiet, or made a joke, or simply walked into another room, and the other person let it happen because the tension was exhausting, because continuing felt worse than stopping. But moving on is not the same as resolving, and what didn't get said doesn't disappear. It waits for the next argument, the next small moment, the next reaction that feels too big for what just happened. Today I want to show you 7 things people do after arguments that feel like resolution, but aren't. 7 ways of ending a conversation without closing it. None of them are malicious. Most of them are well-intentioned. That's what makes them so persistent. My name is Daniel Mercer, and one of the things I've noticed consistently in how unresolved conflict accumulates in relationships is that the problem is rarely the argument itself. It's what happens after. Most couples have a shared instinct when conflict gets difficult. Move toward normal as quickly as possible. Restore the atmosphere. Get back to something that feels okay. But good again is not the same as resolved. And when the return to normal consistently happens before the actual issue is addressed, what builds up over time is not just unresolved conflict. It's a growing sense that certain things cannot be talked about, that certain topics are too difficult to finish, that the relationship can handle a lot of things, but not this. Here are the 7 ways that pattern takes hold. Number 1, acting like nothing happened. This is the most common one. The argument ends or simply stops, and both people return to ordinary life. Dinner gets made. The television goes on. A normal conversation begins about something unrelated. And on the surface, this looks like grace, like 2 people choosing to move past something rather than letting it consume the evening. But there's a difference between choosing to let something go and choosing to avoid finishing it. And acting like nothing happened is almost always the second thing, not the first. The thing that caused the argument is still there. The feeling that drove it hasn't resolved. It's been covered over by dinner, by television, by the relief of not fighting anymore. And the person who needed something from that conversation didn't get it. They got the end of the tension, which felt better than the tension, but left them with the original need still unmet, now with no place to go. Number 2, apologizing without understanding. The apology comes quickly. I'm sorry. Sometimes with genuine feeling, sometimes with relief because the apology ends the conflict faster than anything else. But an apology is not resolution. An apology is the acknowledgement that something went wrong. Resolution requires understanding what went wrong and why, in enough depth that both people feel the thing has actually been addressed. When an apology arrives before that understanding, when "I'm sorry" is said before either person has actually examined what happened, it functions as a conversation ender rather than a conversation opener. The other person accepts it, because refusing an apology feels unreasonable, because they're tired too. They accepted the apology, but they still didn't feel understood. And the same thing happens again, because nothing changed. Because the apology addressed the surface, the tone, the raised voice, the specific thing that was said, but not the pattern underneath it, the pattern that made that conversation happen in the first place. Number 3, using humor to reset. One person makes a joke, or does something small and affectionate, touches the other person's shoulder, makes a face, offers something light, and the other person laughs, or softens, and the tension breaks. This one is particularly difficult to address because it works. The humor does reduce the tension. The affection does make both people feel better. And in the moment, that feels like progress. But what it actually does is interrupt the emotional process before it's complete. Laughter, in those moments, is a kind of punctuation. It signals that the hard part is over, even when the hard part hasn't actually ended. And the person who needed to finish the conversation finds themselves laughing instead, which feels better than arguing, but leaves them, once the laughter fades, still holding the thing that needed to be said. The topic becomes slightly harder to reopen after that, because reopening it means choosing difficulty over the relief that was just offered. And that choice becomes harder every time it isn't made. Number 4. Agreeing just to end it. One person, usually the one with more capacity at that moment, or more discomfort with conflict, says, "You're right," or "Okay, I hear you," or "Let's just move on." And the other person hears it as resolution. The disagreement is over. Something was conceded. The conflict produced a result. But the person who said, "You're right," didn't necessarily mean it. They meant, "I don't have the energy to continue this," or "I'd rather end it than be right," or "Saying this will stop the argument faster than anything else I could say." And so, a false agreement gets filed. The person who received the concession believes the thing was settled. The person who gave it knows it wasn't. And they carry that knowledge quietly, privately, into the next conversation, and the one after that. Until one day, in a different argument, everything that was falsely agreed to comes back. Not as a reopened topic because it was never properly opened. As a weight. As a feeling that these conversations always end the same way, and that it has never once actually helped. Number 5. Giving space that becomes distance. After a difficult conversation, one person withdraws. They need time to process. They go quiet. They become less available. Not as punishment, but as a genuine need for space. And the other person gives it, because they sense that pressing would make things worse. Because they're giving what they'd want to receive. Because space, offered after conflict, seems like a reasonable and mature response. But space, when it's not accompanied by any signal of return, any indication of when it will end, or what the person withdrawing is thinking, or whether they're okay, can start to feel like something else. It can start to feel like punishment, or like withdrawal, or like the other person has simply left the conversation and isn't coming back. And by the time the person who withdrew returns, the other person has been sitting in uncertainty for however long that took, unsure what the silence meant, unsure whether the conversation is over or just paused. The need for space was real, but without a signal of return, it created a second wound beside the original one. Number 6. Returning to normal without checking in. A day passes, or a few hours. The tension has lifted. Both people feel better, or at least less raw than they did, and the relationship resumes its ordinary rhythm. And nobody checks in. Nobody asks, "Are we okay? Is there anything that didn't get said? Do you feel like that's actually resolved?" Because asking would mean acknowledging that it might not be. And the return to normal has been so welcome, the relief of easier conversation, of lighter atmosphere, of not being in conflict, that neither person wants to disturb it. So the check-in doesn't happen. And both people assume the other is fine. And the thing that caused the argument sits in the background, not addressed, not revisited, but also not gone. What accumulates over time is not just unresolved conflict. It's a relationship in which difficult things consistently get returned to normal, without anyone verifying that normal is real. And eventually, that pattern teaches both people. Hard conversations end here. Not resolved, just ended. Number 7. Using the next good moment as proof that things are fine. A day after the argument, something nice happens. A good meal together, a moment of laughter, an evening that feels easy. And something in both people relaxes because this, right here, feels like evidence that things are okay. But a good moment after an unresolved argument is not the same as resolution. It's a good moment, which is real and worth having, but it doesn't address what the argument was about. What happens instead is that the good moment gets used as a reason not to go back. To reopen something now, when things finally feel okay, seems unnecessary, disruptive, like choosing to create a problem when one doesn't currently exist. So the unresolved thing stays unresolved, covered now by a good memory as well as by time, And each good moment that follows makes it harder to go back, because going back means interrupting something that feels, on the surface, like it's working. The relationship can accumulate years of good moments alongside years of unresolved things. And from the outside, from inside most of those moments, it looks fine. Until something makes the accumulated weight visible. And then, it looks like it happens suddenly. But it didn't. It was always there, waiting underneath the good moments for someone to look. Here's what all 7 of these behaviors share. They all prioritize the restoration of comfort over the completion of the conversation. They're not acts of cruelty, they're acts of self-protection, of exhaustion management, of choosing the path that feels less damaging in the moment. And in the moment, they can feel safer. The argument doesn't escalate, the tension drops, both people breathe again. But the cost comes later, because the thing that needed to be finished wasn't. And in relationships, unfinished things don't stay unfinished. They become harder to finish. They accumulate companions, other unfinished things, other avoided topics, other moments where the conversation ended before it closed. And eventually, 2 people can find themselves in a relationship that feels functional. No major conflict, no visible crisis, but somehow less open than it used to be. Less able to hold the things that are actually difficult. More careful, more managed, less real. Not because either person stopped caring, because the resolution muscle, the ability to stay in difficulty long enough to actually finish something, has been quietly atrophying every time it wasn't used. Here's what I want to be clear about. Every one of these behaviors comes from something understandable. Acting like nothing happened comes from not wanting to make things worse. Apologizing quickly comes from genuine regret. Using humor comes from wanting to bring warmth back. Giving space comes from respecting what the other person needs. None of these are failures of love. They're failures of completion. The love is there. The intention is usually good. What's missing is the willingness or the ability to stay in the discomfort long enough for the conversation to actually close. And that willingness is hard. Not because people don't care, but because finishing difficult conversations is genuinely uncomfortable. It requires staying present when the instinct is to withdraw. It requires saying more when saying less feels safer. It requires risking another round of difficulty when peace is right there, available, if you'll just stop pressing. Most people choose peace, repeatedly, and then wonder, later, why the difficult things never seem to get resolved. The answer is usually not that the relationship is broken. It's that resolution was consistently sacrificed for relief. And relief, however welcome, is not the same thing. If any of this is familiar, I want to offer something practical. Not a script for difficult conversations, not a method, just one question, asked at the right moment with genuine openness. After things calm down, not in the middle of the argument, but after, ask, is there anything that didn't get said? That question won't fix everything, but it tells the other person something important. I'm not just trying to get back to peace. I want to know if we actually finished. Sometimes the answer will be no, and that no will be real, a genuine sense that things actually landed. But sometimes the answer will be yes, and what comes after that yes, however uncomfortable, however brief, will do more for the relationship than 100 smooth evenings that ended too soon. Because a relationship that can finish hard conversations is more resilient than one that avoids them. More honest, more capable of holding the things that actually need to be held. The argument ending is not the same as the argument being over. Learn the difference and ask.